Hey guys, welcome to the first installment of Chase That Song. My name is Sean Clemens, and this is going to be my platform to talk about all things country music and then some. Growing up, I've always had a major interest in music. Having younger parents really exposed me to a lot of different decades and genres of music. You know, like riding around in my mom's car, I always heard things like Conway Twitty, TLC, Matchbox 20, Alice in Chains, things like that. And in my dad's truck, I would always hear like AC/DC, Hank Williams Jr., the Beastie Boys, just whatever, we could all get our hands on. I'd usually look through their CD collection, just kind of cycle through, see what all I liked and didn't like, what all I recognized from the radio. That was my introduction to Purple Rain by Prince, just that album as a whole, and I hold that on a pedestal along with albums like Pink Floyd's The Wall or The New South by Hank Williams Jr., just all these different albums that I really found through my parents' CD collection. I've really had a high interest in music since I could talk. I mean, my first words according to my mom were those Conway Twitty lyrics. The song "You Never Been This Far Before" when he says "bum bum bum," apparently that was like the first words that ever came out of my mouth. Over the years, I've gone through a lot of different phases, just exposing myself to different subgenres of music. Whether it be like in middle school, a lot of people go through it, listening to like Linkin Park and Slipknot, and getting into that kind of stuff. Or the first half of high school was my introduction to artists like Kendrick Lamar, Tyler the Creator, A$AP Rocky, all that little era of rap where all those guys were up and coming. And then the second half of high school was really when I started getting back into the roots of what I grew up listening to and started getting really into Southern rock, just more than just Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers, but really getting in deep into the Marshall Tucker Band's discography, or artists like The Outlaws, Blackfoot, all these guys that just kill it. And then over the last few years, I've really gotten into like roots and heartland rock, what I call working class rock, basically, just guys like Tom Petty, John Mellencamp, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Seger, and then, there's Linda Ronstadt, I consider her in that category. But, just that as a whole. And then all those phases really didn't stop me from exploring other subgenres of music, like I've gotten into like different indie rock groups, like a lot of different up and coming blues rock, of course the Black Keys, everybody loves them. Really got into Kings of Leon there for a while. And getting really into a lot of like Christian artists too over the years. Growing up I wasn't really into Christian music, but the last few years, I've started going back to church, and also just really getting into the music, whether it be Christian rock groups like Flyleaf or, some Creed songs, Skillet, getting into Christian rap, Lecrae, KB, Tadashi, Trip Lee, getting into a lot of the contemporary artists, Zach Williams, Need to Breathe, just really just exposing myself to everything I can get my hands on. But there's one constant during this whole time that I've been exploring all these different genres of music, is just my overwhelming love for country music. A lot of different things in my life I can tie back to certain songs by certain artists of the genre, just because, that's what I grew up around. Mostly it was country music, classic rock, things like that. But when it came to country, it was just, if we turned on the radio, the first stations we would go to, if it wasn't a classic rock station, was boom, country, just right off the bat. It never really was, going out of our way to go straight to the pop stations or things like that. So, it was just always, I guess it's the culture of the area I grew up in. I could sit here and talk about country music for hours, which is why I really wanted to start this YouTube channel. I really wanted to use this as an opportunity to share my thoughts and opinions on different albums that are either coming out recently or if came out in the past, just doing like little reviews here and there, or also just talking about news and country music, or just doing a general discussion of the genre and the artists and albums and songs that just mean so much to me and to others as well. I would love to hear what you guys would like for me to review in the future, talk about in the future. But until then, I really want to get into talking about the state of country music in my first video here. When I talk about the state of country music, I really mean mostly the mainstream, like the stuff that is always on the radio or, you know, just the stuff that, you know, you hear about on the award shows, things like that. I, you know, always hear the same excuses when it comes to modern mainstream country music. And I'll admit, I used to spout these out all the time as well until, you know, I started actually getting back into things. You know, you hear the ones like, oh, I don't really like country music, but I do like Johnny Cash, you know, which is understandable. You know, he has that rock and roll attitude that is attractive to the rock fans, you know, but there's so many other country artists that do that as well, you know. It doesn't have to be a modern artist that they can get into. You look at guys like Hank Williams Jr., who was heavily influenced by blues and southern rock of the time, you know, even working with Toy Caldwell after his infamous fall off of Ajax Mountain. You know, Toy and Waylon and Charlie Daniels, another southern rock artist, really helped get him back on his feet and sparked the career that produced all the songs that everybody knows and enjoys today. Country Boy Can't Survive, All My Right Friends Coming Over Tonight, Born to Boogie, things like that. Another excuse I hear is, I love country music, but I hate that crap on the radio. I agree to that to some extent. You know, it just depends on what station it is, what songs they're playing, things like that. You know, you're not always going to find a lot of crap on country radio anymore. You know, I think that we've really gotten out of that bro country era of about, say, 2011 to 2015-ish, around there. You know, I really think that we are starting to get out of that and starting to go back to traditional sounds. And then another excuse you hear is, since when did country music become a genre made specifically for frat bros? Which, I'm not a fan of that statement. I was in a fraternity myself, so I hate when people try to stereotype, but going beyond that, that's for another time. I don't really see country music being made specifically for that group. If you're talking about bro country, I get, you know, bro, frat bro, you know, kind of tying together. But I think that bro country is really more or less just, you know, hey, let's go out there and just make a few party songs, and it became popular, and so then everybody else just like, hey, I can make a quick buck off that, and just kept going and going and going. But anymore, that style is fading off. And those artists that are the bro style aren't as big as they were about 5 years ago. So if you do go to, you know, like a tailgate or something, there's, you know, fraternity guys there and they're playing that stuff, a lot of times they're also throwing in some good stuff. Like, you'll hear some Luke Combs out there, you know. If you go down to, like, Texas, they're out there bumping some Josh Abbott Band and Cody Johnson. I mean, you can't go wrong with those two guys. Or, you know, any other Red Dirt artist for that matter. You know, Parker McCollum, you got Randy Rogers Band, Wade Bowen, you know, just the list goes on forever. You know, so you get out here to, you know, my neck of the woods, out towards Kentucky, you know, you're getting some Chris Stapleton thrown in, very little, along with, you know, some of the guys I like to sweep under the rug, Sam Hunt, Dylan Scott, Luke Bryan. Not a big fan, honestly. They have moments, but I just can't get into it. But in general, it's just unfair to group country music as a whole and discredit it, especially in the modern mainstream sound. Like, you just can't just put it all under that bro country umbrella and think that that's all right, because there's so many artists that are either up and coming, already in the mainstream, or artists that are right there in between the up and coming and mainstream that are just really good. And they know what they're doing. They're making songs that are relatable, making songs that tell stories just like they used to. Adding in steel guitar again, adding in fiddle again. You hear that in John Party's newest songs. You know, it's all coming back, I think. You know, so you look at pop country and the way that people describe it, and you just go back to the past. You know, you go all the way back to about, I'd say the 60s is really when pop country really started to bubble up. You know, you got that countrypolitan sound. You know, I don't really know if that is the true root of country pop. I mean, maybe for the people of that era, that was, okay, we're hearing pop orchestration coming into country music. But I mean, really, a lot of that was still traditional. I don't really think it was until the 70s that it really started to flare up. In the 70s, you really had a lot of pop and folk singers start to realize, hey, I can make a few quick bucks if I just go this route. You had Anne Murray, John Denver, Olivia Newton-John. You had all of them coming in, starting to make more country music. I mean, honestly, looking at it today, by today's standards, it sounds very traditional and has a message to it. But during that era, that was really when people started to raise an eyebrow, like, hey, well, these guys are coming out of another genre and coming in here. What's going on here? Like, they're adding in that pop flavor. But looking at it today, like I said, by today's standards of what country music should sound like, according to a lot of purists like myself, I really don't see that much of an issue with it. And then you get into the 80s, and you have Kenny Rogers, Eddie Rabbitt, even Dolly Parton. They started to add a lot of pop sounds to country music, blend that together, and ride that throughout the early 80s. And I think that is really when it does get a little questionable, because then that's when some collaborations come in with artists outside of the genre for like one or two songs out of this one artist's discography. Like, you look at somebody like say Kenny Rogers, getting a few duets strung out there. But I mean, even then, I think that it was just a good opportunity for those other artists outside of the genre to come in and say, hey, I can cover a wide range of music. Here I am doing a country song with Kenny Rogers, one of music's top stars right now. But, yet again, looking at it by today's standards, it's still fairly traditional. There's a lot of pop production, a lot of pop instrumentation, but there was a lot of that traditional lyricism, that delivery, and still traditional instrumentation along with the pop. It was just a good blend at that time. Because there is really good pop country. I'm not gonna lie. As a purist, I don't mind a lot of the pop. Then you get into about the mid-80s, and that is when neo-traditional country starts to rise up. You get guys like George Strait, Keith Whitley, Dwight Yoakam, and then of course you end up getting into the class of 89, bringing back a lot of the sounds that were implemented by Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, just the guys that everybody looks to, especially today, as main core inspirations of country music that just exemplify, or that just really show the world what country music is, I guess. But as you get towards the late 80s, early 90s, that's when Garth Brooks comes onto the scene. And I don't want to sound like I'm bad-mouthing Garth, because I do enjoy a lot of his music, especially all the 90s stuff before the whole Chris Gaines thing. Just growing up on that, listening to it on CMT, GAC, CDs, whatever I can get my hands on, I love a lot of it. Thunder Rolls is like one of my top 100 greatest songs of all time, honestly. That's also for another time, making a list, I guess. But you look at Garth Brooks, and starting out, he wasn't that into country music according to a few things that I've read. I mean, he was into it, don't get me wrong, but I feel like he really wanted to be a rock star, because one of his biggest inspirations is the band Kiss, and they're, above and beyond hard rock, party, let's put on a show. And that is really what Garth implemented in a lot of his live shows, and still kind of does today, with a lot of the theatrics and just turning country music into an arena genre, which a lot of people look to you know, if I was comparing this to rock, a lot of people look at arena rock bands like Boston, Journey, Styx, all those guys, and die-hard fans of rock and roll of that era kind of hated that. And so you get that in country music too. You know, a lot of the die-hard fans of that era kind of hated that Garth Brooks was doing the whole arena thing like he was. And I feel like doing that really inspired some others of that time that went on to do a lot of pop-oriented stuff, like Shania Twain. Once again, not discrediting her, love her music, especially a lot of her 90s stuff, you know, very talented. But I think that you look at artists of today and look at those bro country artists, a lot of them will give credit to the artists like Garth Brooks and Shania Twain as major influences. And it's obvious, honestly, you know, going into country music with a pop attitude really came from the pop country sounds that Garth and Shania were putting out. You know, these artists today really took more the pop aspect of their music instead of the country aspect of their music, you know, because you look at Garth and Shania, you know, they have influences that go all the way back to Letty Frizzell, Kitty Wells, Loretta Lynn, Hank Snow. You look at that, and then you look at these today, you're not really finding that in a lot of those bro country artists. I mean, they may actually have those, but they're not very vocal about it, and you can't really hear it in their music. But on another note, you know, just growing up, I was always hearing traditional country music on channels like CMT, GAC, on the radio, things like that. But it really just over time was like the quality was doing this little number right here, just coming right back down, and it just wasn't as good as I had remembered it was like 5 years prior. And this was all the way up until I got into about middle school. And come about my 9th grade year, or I would say about 7th or 8th grade year of school, I just gave up on country music as a whole when it came to country radio. You know, the last good artist I had heard was Eric Church and Justin Moore being played on the radio. But that was once in a blue moon at that time. And this was really when Jamie Johnson was getting bigger on the scene. You know, my 7th grade year or 6th grade year, I can't remember, was when the Guitar Song came out. And prior to that, when I was in about 5th or 6th grade, was when That Lonesome Song came out, and that's one of my top 10 all-time favorite albums. So just these two critically acclaimed, like, near perfect albums just really gave me hope for modern country music. However, radio just wasn't playing it. They played in color. I heard Playing the Part a few times on the radio. I heard Jamie Johnson perform Macon on one of the CMAs or ACMs, can't remember which ones. But that was it. And it was really just getting more and more dull on radio. And so I just kind of gave up on it. And it really wasn't until I got to about my junior or senior year of high school that one of our family friends introduced my dad and I to Whitey Morgan. And that is really when I started to have a little bit more hope again for modern country music. You know, because at this time, the only modern country music artists I really liked was Casey Musgraves, Eric Church. I had lost a little respect for Justin Moore after Off the Beaten Path came out, but I was still listening to his first 2 albums. And that was really about it. So Whitey Morgan was just this breath of fresh air, because here he was, this guy that sounded like Waylon Jennings, but just had this rawness that was his own. Like, he made his own sound out of this. Like, he wasn't trying to be an imitator. It was just awesome. And so from there, I really started getting into other guys. You know, I slowly started to get into Cody Jinks, slowly started to get into the Turnpike Troubadours, and just over time, I started getting more and more into these underground outlaw artists, the guys that I had listened to in the past, Dallas Moore, Hank Williams the third, Shooter Jennings, getting really into those guys again, and then exposing myself to Nikki Lane or Ashley Monroe, who I ended up finding through the Pistolanes first, thanks to Miranda Lambert. Just really getting into all these different artists just really started to pull me back towards, okay, I need to check out the radio, because I had heard that, some Casey Musgrave songs were still getting airplay on the radio. Some Eric Church songs were still getting airplay. So I started going back and looking at these different artists that were up and coming, and up until now, I would say within the last 2 or 3 years, I've really seen a change in the mainstream. You look at Luke Combs coming up, just his relatability and overall sound is just, it's easy to get into. Very easy to get into, whether you're a traditionalist or not. Like, he's really bridging the gap. Same with Midland, Brothers Osborne. You look at artists that are, singer-songwriters that are coming up in this country music genre, like Tenille Townes. Honestly, she's got some pop influence in her, of course. What mainstream country artist really doesn't anymore, honestly. But, she's really got this rawness and just really writes from the heart with every song that she writes. And then, you look at guys that are up and coming that I really started to enjoy about 4 years ago, about this time that I was starting to get into, like the Whitey Morgan, Red Dirt, Outlaw, just all that. Like Cody Johnson, Aaron Watson. They're starting to get airplay on mainstream country radio. It's no longer Texas country radio that they're getting airplay on. So just seeing that really gives me hope for the future, because we're finding more and more artists like those guys are getting a lot of high praise. You look at, and Cody Johnson is up for New Artist of the Year now. Of course, to myself and, fans of Texas Red Dirt scene, they know Cody Johnson isn't new to this, but it's just awesome to see him on there. And then, honestly, a lot of the different nominees over these past few years, it's like the categories are getting more and more traditional, or at least just minimizing more and more of the pop sound. You look at award winners throughout the past few years, you look at like Chris Stapleton sweeping the CMAs like back in, 2016, I believe. Didn't do a lot of research before this video. I know it was in recent years, just couldn't think of it off the top of my head. But you look at, Casey Musgraves winning Album of the Year at the CMAs, the ACMs, the Grammys, just all these different awards going out to the artists that are actually trying, not the artists that were given a career and went out and made the same cookie cutter songs over and over and over. It's just amazing to me to see artists like, a lot of these bro country artists or pop, straight up pop artists getting passed up on country music awards and things like that. So it really, really gives me hope for the future. And honestly, I think that for the state of country music as of right now, I don't think that pop country is really as big of an issue as it was a few years ago. I think more or less the issue now is major record labels. Anymore we're seeing more and more independent artists on the rise. We're seeing more and more of those artists getting signed to major labels, but giving artistic freedom, creative freedom. You look at Sturgill Simpson or Tyler Childers, Chris Stapleton, they've all been given a lot of creative freedom and the opportunity to just make albums on their time. and they're under major labels. You know, that's almost unheard of. So just being able to do that has really propelled their names into mainstream country and really gotten them a lot of notoriety. And that is really what a lot of these artists need. And I think artists like Cody Jinks, you look at Kelsey Walden, Hailey Whitters, I think that all of these artists that are up and coming like they are and signing to bigger labels and selling out shows, I think that they will really help impact the future of country music. That's all for my video today. Thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe and like this video, and I'll see you next time.